We got to have some music or something here. James, you didn't happen to win any singing contest, did you?
No, trust me, my wife would. I only sound good in the shower, but
Oh, God.
And only to you, right?
only to me. That's right.
That's all right. Amber, you're still on mute, but I think you have the ability to mute or unmute yourself. There we go. Yes, everybody's running from other meetings this morning, so don't panic. This evening. I haven't even stopped yet. I don't know what to...
Oh, I just love community meetings with Republicans that see everything that you do as politically motivated, and they're on your Zoom account and you're like, you wrap it up or I'm cutting you off. So anyway.
I love it. I love it. Now, are you running for office?
Nope, not this year.
Okay. Okay.
The only options I had for running for office were County Board of Supervisors, which didn't interest me, or running against Joni Ernst. And I think Teresa's doing a great job.
Yep. Yep. I agree. Well, we've got to, as Democrats, we've always got to look for the the option.
That's right. I hope to run in 22, so we'll see. We'll see how the whole thing shakes out. But yeah.
Good. Yeah. Well, people will hope. I think we've got a really interested crowd today. So you might win some supporters today.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And
I think.
James, do you go by James or Jim?
Well, I go by James, but
Okay.
I answered anything nice, Amber. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. I am such a huge fan of your family.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So it's a pleasure to get to meet another Norris.
Thank you. Thank you.
It looks like we've got 13 participants. There's our panelists, and we've got. Well, there's another Norris in the crowd there too.
I bet there is.
They're everywhere.
That's right.
That's great. We're just wait for a signal from Jackie to get started, and then I'll kind of walk everybody through.
You can go anytime, Glenn.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna stop sharing that there. I'm Glenn Hurst. I'm chair of the Rural Caucus. It sounds like there's a feedback going on.
I think it was Jan plugging in there.
Oh, okay.
I think we're good now.
Okay, good. So I'm Glenn Hurst. I'm chair of the Rural Caucus. You all elected me back in July, I think it was, and we have just hit the ground running. I want to welcome everybody to the forum. This particular forum is the Defending Your Second Amendment Rights. What does sensible gun control look like? We're going to try to wrap up promptly by 8 o'clock. And we've got two really great presenters here today, and we're going to give each of them a little bit of time. Our first one will speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll use the remainder of a 20-minute period, so 5 to 10 minutes for questions directly to that person, and then the next person will share and the same deal. And then after that, we'll kind of have a facilitated discussion between the two of them and all of you. So I'd encourage everybody to get familiar with the chat function here in the webinar. Just if you float your cursor, if you're on a computer, float your cursor in this Zoom field, you'll notice at the bottom, almost in the center, there's a spot that says chat. Click on that chat and a little window will open over to your right-hand side, and you'll be able to type messages at the bottom, and we'll be able to see those. Jan, hello from Red Oak. Sandy from Cass County. See how that works? Mike from the People's Republic of Johnston County. I encourage you all to use that chat function to talk with us. I want to take a moment to recognize any of our elected officials or candidates who are running for a position here. I know I see Thaddeus Hawley who is running for county supervisor in Adair County. I see Joey Norris, who is running for, James, you're going to have to correct me on this, Senate District 12. Senate District 12 senator for the Iowa Senate. Yeah, it's all over the signs all around behind you. God forbid I look over there. So thank you, Joey, for being here, and thanks. There's Karen from Avoca. We're glad to have everybody here. Feel free to change your name and put what you're running for at the end of your name. People will be able to see it if they click on participants, so they'll know who's out there. I saw Representative Donahue was going to join us as well, and I don't know if she's made it on here or not, but she's also running for her seat again. So it's good to see everybody. I want to do a special thanks to Judy Kading, Jackie Stiver-Cordone, and Vicki Rossander, who organized this particular event. They are organizing all of our forums. We're going to try to be doing at least 2 a month up to election, and then we'll spread it out to 1 a month. We've got some great ideas coming up. Our next one is going to be September 30th. It's going to be an education forum called Small Schools, Big Worries. And Mike, oh my gosh, they told me how to pronounce it. Mike Baranek, yes, is president of the Iowa State Association, Education Association. He's going to be with us, and Margaret Buxton, who is with the Iowa School Finance Information Services. So we're going to be speaking a good deal about financing education and school budgets, talking about teacher shortages, equity for access for rural students to college and career readiness. We're going to talk about kind of the economies of scale and meeting state accreditation and student diversity. So it's a really interesting topic. And that's going to be September 17th at 6:30 p.m. and it'll be another Zoom event. So watch for that coming from the Rural Caucus. We have another meeting this week. This is our caucus membership meeting, which is going to be September 17th at 6:30 p.m. So with that being kind of the business of getting started here, we're at about 6 minutes after, and I'm going to introduce our first presenter. And our first person is Amber Gustafson, who is an Iowa activist with roots in Southwest Iowa, having been born in Leon and graduated from Orient Maxburg schools, where she lived through the farm crisis in the 1980s. She learned from her mother that education was the way out of poverty, and pursuing her dream of a college education was helped by the Christina Hickson Opportunity Award scholarship she received, allowing her to be the first in her family to graduate from college. Now, Ms. Gustafson has used her experience and education to work hard for her community. Prompted by the tragedy in Newton, Connecticut, she joined a fledgling organization called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And for 5 years, she worked to stem the rising tide of gun violence in America in leadership positions. When Iowa legislators refused to adopt common sense gun legislation 3 times in a row, Ms. Gustafson ran for the state Senate and came within 3 points of beating the Iowa Senate Majority Leader in November of 2018. So presently, Ms. Gustafson is a graduate student at Drake University pursuing a Master of Arts in Communication, Public Policy, and Advocacy. And with that, I turn it over to Ms. Gustafson.
Well, thank you so much. And I have to give a shout out to Christina Hickson because she is also from Southwest Iowa. She is originally from Clarinda, and so also the daughter of a single mom. So if you ever are interested in knowing more about her and her history and how she came into her billions of dollars, it's really a great story. So check it out sometime. But I am so grateful and thankful to be here tonight and to talk about something that is my passion and that a sphere that I've been working in for a really long time in the gun safety arena. And so first of all, I always like to make sure to tell people that my husband and I are gun owners. My son is a member of the trap shooting team. And so our family likes to trap shoot and we like to, target shoot and that kind of stuff. We're not hunters. We don't have the patience and the attention to sit in a cold deer stand. I learned that early on in my life. I also like to always tell people, especially people who are not originally from like rural Iowa, this story because I love to see the look on their faces. The very first date I ever went on, there was a loaded gun in the car. It was a shotgun on the gun rack, because that is how I grew up. And nobody thought anything of it. That was just normal. And so grew up around guns, shot different types of guns, and had a lot of fun doing stuff, whether it was going out and hunting and that type of thing. But the idea that somebody would bring a firearm into the Easter's grocery store in Creston was just a foreign concept to me. That's something that my parents would have never dreamt of doing. And as time went on, I began to recognize, especially as a mother, that the culture and the conversation around guns had begun to change. And then, as Glenn mentioned, the school shootings, the Sandy Hook school shooting, really was a turning point for me, because I was a suburban mom at that point with kids in school. And so my perspective on the issue of guns changed. And so I realized that that as a gun owner, it was important for me to join the conversation. As somebody who represents a rural voice, it was important for me to join the conversation, because at the time I thought, well, if only Democrats are going to be making up the decisions on how guns are going to be handled, they're going to get it wrong, and I need to be involved. And so I decided to jump in with both feet, and long story short, found Moms Demand Action. It was a fledgling organization, just had launched, and kind of jumped in with both feet to get involved. And I will tell you, it has been an interesting experience, because a lot of the folks that are part of Moms are Connecticut, Connecticut liberals, I'll just say it that way. And we love them, but they have a very different perspective on guns. And, I one time was interviewed by a reporter from WNYC in New York, and I told her that my son was on the trap shooting team, and she was like, track? No, trap. And of course, trap means something completely different to people in New York, has to do with drugs. And she was like, it's a what now? And I said, no, trap shooting, it's a form of target shooting, where you shoot these clay targets that they throw up in the air. And she was like, but like with a real gun? Well, yes, dear. How else are you going to shoot a clay target but with a gun? And so, so there's been a lot of interesting opportunities for cross-cultural conversations around why do people own guns? That's a question I answer a lot when I am working in the Moms Demand Action space. Why own a gun? And that sort of thing. But, tonight, one of the things that I kind of want to share with you is, I think oftentimes, regardless of where you're at politically, we oftentimes have a lot of misconceptions about what gun violence is, who's carrying out gun violence, what types of firearms are being used for gun violence. And so, first of all, the majority of gun deaths in this country are suicide. And the vast majority of those are carried out with handguns. The vast majority of those are carried out by white men, and the vast majority of those men are over the age of 35. So from a demographic standpoint, the single greatest predictor of dying by a firearm is being a white male over the age of 35 and being a gun owner. And that, I think, is really kind of eye-opening a lot of times for people, because the conversation around guns in this country typically tends to center on mass shootings, because they are these horrible, horrific tragedies that, absolutely dominate the news cycle. And they're terrible, and they're a nightmare scenario, and every parent's worst waking nightmare. And so, but the issue with centering the conversation about gun safety around mass shootings is that accounts for less than 2% of all gun violence in this country. And so, so we need to have a conversation about mass shootings, absolutely, but we also need to focus on that, the 100 people that die by guns every single day, 60 of them roughly are suicide. And so, we also can throw in there, interpersonal gun violence, the types of things that often happens within cities, domestic violence. and unintentional shootings as well. And you'll notice that I'm very selective with the language that I use, and that's part of being part of moms. And I'm not here necessarily tonight just speaking as a representative of moms, but a lot of the language that we use is very intentional. For example, we don't use the phrase gun control, because that's a very loaded, no pun intended, phrase that has a lot of connotations. And so we use gun violence and gun safety instead. So when you're out talking with constituents and when you're out talking with potential voters and that sort of thing, using words like gun violence, gun safety, gun violence prevention can be more of a door opener. Also, we don't say accidental shootings, because there should be no accidental shootings. Anyone who is a gun, that knows how to handle a firearm knows that you only aim what you plan to shoot. You only aim at what you plan to shoot. You treat every gun as though it is loaded. And if you follow those simple safety rules, then there should be no reason for a tragedy. But when people don't follow safety rules, that becomes a preventable accident or a preventable incident. And so we use things like unintentional shooting rather than accident. So in Iowa, the first thing to know about our state is we are within the top third in the country for gun ownership, but we are within the bottom third for gun violence and gun deaths. But 80% of our deaths are suicide. Suicide is increasing. It's been increasing over the last 30 to 40 years. Right now, it's as high as it was during World War II. We are seeing more suicides among teens, among people of color than we have ever seen in the past before. But of course, that demographic group of white males really still makes up the big bulk of suicides. And so in Iowa, we've always historically had strong gun laws, and that has always kept us kind of in that kind of middle range. I always kind of joke that, like, historically, Iowa always got a C from the Brady group and a C from the NRA. So you knew, like, nobody was happy, right? But as far as like the issues organizations, but we were safe. We've always been safe. And another reason why Iowa has really low gun deaths as well is because as a percentage, we own more long guns than we own handguns, because we're a hunting state. And so handguns are really, where a lot more accidental shooting or unintentional shootings happen. And that's where a lot more interpersonal violence happens. And those are the ones that are typically used in self-inflicted. So what has happened over the last couple of years, and certainly since the Republicans have taken over the legislature, is this push for weakening Iowa's gun laws. And, that whole, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But apparently, that doesn't work for these guys. And so in the 2017 legislative session, they passed an omnibus gun bill that had a lot of different things in it. But one of the biggest sticking points within the gun bill, within that omnibus gun bill, was the stand your ground law. And Moms has historically fought stand your ground. Stand your ground is a law that disproportionately affects people of color, communities of color, particularly Black men. It will lead to a rise in homicide, justifiable homicide. It's been very interesting, though, because the way that the Iowa law was written, it did not create a provision for a pretrial hearing to determine whether that law or whether that defense could actually be used in any criminal trials. And so therefore, it's only been used in one criminal trial, in Red Oak, actually, a shooting that happened in an alleyway behind a bar, and that individual that was involved in that was not tried and was given immunity under Stand Your Ground. Johnson County had a Stand Your Ground trial a few years ago, and it was thrown out, or no, the trial wasn't thrown out, but the judge said, I can't use this law because how do I decide? There's no process here. And so just to kind of clarify what Stand Your Ground is, and it's a little bit different from state to state, but basically, previously, Iowa had castle doctrine, which meant that when you're within the four walls of your home, you can do anything you need to do to protect yourself from bodily injury or death. and you do not have any duty to retreat when you are within the four walls of your own home. Once you get outside of the four walls of your own home and off of your own property, previously under the way that Iowa code was written, you had a duty to retreat. So if you felt threatened, your first opportunity, your first directive was that you needed to retreat. You needed to remove yourself from the situation, which if you go through a concealed carry class, if you have a good instructor, they will tell you, if you feel threatened, the first thing you should do is remove yourself from the situation. But if you can't, then you can use deadly force to protect yourself. What Stand Your Ground was it removed that, and it said, if you feel threatened, shoot. If you feel threatened, just shoot. You know, go Yosemite Sam, just if you feel threatened, go ahead and shoot. And so it becomes really difficult for juries to decide, well, what does it mean to feel threatened? What does it mean to, you know, that's different for everyone, and, you know, depending upon your circumstance and your situation. There was an incident in Florida many years ago where a young man by the name of Jordan Davis was in a car with a bunch of his friends, a young African-American man, pulled up into a parking lot to get gas. There was a white man there with a gun in his glove box. He felt like Jordan Davis and his friends' music was too loud. He asked them to turn it down. They said no, so he pulled out a gun and he shot them, and he killed Jordan. Jordan was 17 years old because he felt threatened. He claimed that he felt threatened in that moment. So you can see there's a lot of problems with Stand Your Ground. Like I said, we have it here in Iowa. It's not well written, hasn't been applied in a lot of cases. I guess we can thank our lucky stars for that. The big thing that the Iowa legislature is pushing for right now is permitless carry. So doing away with the Iowa permitting system. And, you know, we know that states that require permits for handguns, oh, and time notification. Okay, great. So keep me on track, because once I get going, I get going. So don't be afraid to jump in, cut me off. So anyways, just to give you a really quick update on permitless carry. We'll do away with the permit system in Iowa. Permits keep everybody safer. They make sure guns don't fall into the hands of people that shouldn't have them. They're pushing for a constitutional amendment that would do away with that. And so it's very important that we hold on to the legislature and to make sure that that does not pass, because there's a lot of other issues that come along with permitless carry, and I can answer more of those questions as we go along.
Okay, great. Amber,
Sorry.
no, not trying to stop you at all. It was fascinating, and there's plenty to listen to. You know, could you speak a little bit about kind of legislative priorities that are coming up in Iowa, and maybe on the federal level as well? Yeah,
like I said, the permitless carry, the constitutional amendment, you know, those are really some key issues. And as far as on the federal level, I think there's two things that I kind of want to hit on really quickly, and that is, one is VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. And this is a really, really important one that we need to be talking about, because VAWA has been around since the 1990s. It's a good law. It protects women and other people who are in domestic violence situations. It expired because of the government shutdown and did not get renewed. And so when we elected a new House in 2018, we had a majority of gun sense legislators in the US House, and they said, hey, we need to close this boyfriend loophole. So basically the boyfriend loophole says this, that or I guess I should say, current law is, if you are cohabitating with someone, if you have children with them, if you are married to them or were married to them, and you are convicted of stalking or domestic abuse against those people, or that against your partner, you automatically lose your gun rights. But if you are a dating partner, so you never lived together, you never had kids together, and you were never married, but you dated, you can beat, rape, abuse, stalk, and still keep your gun rights. That's the boyfriend loophole. And so the US House said, we're going to close that loophole, because the relationship shouldn't matter. The crime should be what matters. And so they decided to close that loophole. They passed that on a bipartisan basis as part of VAWA. And it came to Joni Ernst in her committee, and she said, oh, I can't do this. It won't pass. And so, poof, it went away. Never got scheduled to be debated in committee. And, you know, Senator Ernst herself is a survivor of domestic violence. I too am also a survivor of domestic violence. And so this is very personal to me. We have families and stories that are impacted here in Iowa because of the failure to pass this law. The other piece really quickly is HR 8, which is the bipartisan background check bill that passed in 2018 as well. Again, went over to the Senate, fizzled and died. But that would have required a background check on every single gun sale in the United States, and would probably be one of the biggest and most important things that we could do to lower our gun violence rates in this country.
And we know VAWA and HR 8 were both supported by Loebsack, Finkenauer,
Yep.
and Cindy Axne as well. So important to keep them back in. And you mentioned one of the people who is problematic in getting things done, which was Joni Ernst. Who are the local people that we need to be paying attention to, or organizations? Is it local NRA chapters? Is there a caucus within the legislature to pressure?
Yeah, I mean, so we have several legislators within the Iowa House and Senate that are very, very pro-gun. You know, Chapman definitely is one. Brad Zahn. You know, there's lots of different folks there that Matt Winchittle. And so, you know, these are folks that are pretty dyed in the wool, and, you know, definitely difficult to change their mind on these issues. But there are, you know, Republican legislators that are open, I think, to conversations and supportive of, you know, things like background checks. And so I don't think that it's necessarily a non-starter. You know, in Iowa, we have what's called the Iowa Firearms Coalition. They are the NRA in Iowa, even though they kind of try to position themselves that they are not. But they are backed by the NRA. Their lobbyist, Richard Rogers, is paid by the NRA. And so they are the ones that author and push these bad gun bills. There's also Iowa gun owners. We won't even talk about them. They are a horse of another color. That's Aaron Dorr and that group of folks. They spend more time attacking Iowa Firearms Coalition than they do anyone else. So have at it, boys. And so, you know, so they do a lot of work on the ground. The NRA right now is as weak and as poor as they have ever been. They are under indictment in the Southern District of New York right now, or under investigation in the Southern District of New York right now for nonprofit fraud. You know, Wayne LaPierre has been spending $20,000 on Italian suits with membership money. Their fundraising numbers are way down. You know, the gun safety groups like the Giffords Group and Moms and the Brady Group are better organized, we're better funded, and we have, somebody told me the other night how many gun sense candidates we have running this year. I don't want to say maybe 5,000, maybe, no, could it be possible? I don't know. We have a lot. We have a lot, as far as Moms has a lot of candidates that are supported and that have signed on to the Moms, and that's both Democrats and Republicans.
Okay, great. You mentioned some folks in the legislature. You mentioned Chapman, and I noticed in our participant list that Warren Varley has signed in as well.
Warren. Yeah,
Warren's a candidate running against Chapman and has a real good chance. And just for all of our participants' edification, Warren has just been contacted by the Senate Majority Fund regarding putting support behind his campaign, which doesn't mean, hey, you don't have to support him. It means you want to throw your support behind him because they see that as a winning race. So there's an opportunity to make a legislative change right there. So thanks for joining us, Warren. And I know that Warren is doing these forums as well. He's going to have a gun forum as well coming up shortly. So everybody check out Warren Varley's page as well. Amber, thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and encourage people to put questions into that Zoom webinar chat. And I think what we'll do is we'll go to James and and have him share with us for a little bit. And then we'll kind of come back to questions that we found in that chat. But let me tell you a little bit about James Norris first. If that's a familiar name for you all, Norris, like I said, it's partially because we've got Joey Norris, who's running for Senate District 12 in our chat as well, attending today, and we're wishing him luck on his race. James is also brother of John Norris, and really the hard worker in the Norris family in Southwest Iowa. Jan Norris, his wife, should be recognized as well. Thank you, Jen, for all you do. But James is here to talk to us as a gun owner, and he's a retired certified financial planner and a lifelong gun owner. He's an avid cowboy action shooter and is Iowa's 9-time state champion, as well as a national placing participant in cowboy action shooting. After moving home and purchasing farm ground that's been in the Norris family for generations, he and his wife Jan live southwest of Red Oak, where they raised their 3 children. Even as a child, Norris recognized his affinity for shooting and love of the outdoors. As a lifelong Democrat, James would like to help others talk about responsible gun ownership and give them the ammunition needed to talk to single-issue Second Amendment voters. In rural elections, this single issue can hurt Democrats, and like I said, James is just a great example of the Norris family's dedication to Iowa, and I'm looking forward to hearing him speak exactly on how to talk to other gun owners. With that, I give you James Norris.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate that. Amber, thanks for your words. I appreciate those as well. And I think this is great that we can have this kind of dialogue so we maybe get a better way to address folks, especially in the rural areas. As far as gun ownership goes, about 29% of people in the urban areas own guns, households. And about 40% of suburbanites homes. When you get into the rural areas, 56%. So we're basically double what the suburban household as far as ownership is, majority. And I think that's important to know because of the fact that hopefully maybe I can give you some information that will help you. My goal is we're never going to sway the far right. I guess I refer to them as the knuckle draggers, okay? The militia groups, people think that. That's not going to happen, and I'm not going to make a premise that I can tell you how to talk to those people probably with a lot of success. But what I would like to help you do is maybe give you that 2 to 4% difference there that could make a difference in an election. And I have, as you mentioned, Glenn, I have been shooting all my life, basically, and competitively for over 20 years. And I have heard everything, as you can well imagine, being the whatever I am, the white rhino or the unicorn in the club, and I rarely tell anybody when I'm shooting them a Democrat because it just creates a division. You know what I mean? So I usually subtly try and interject things with gun owners, and I think that's important that we try and listen to them also because they are. Again, the majority of these people are really good people. They really are. They're the people that are going to pull over and help you if you have a flat tire on the side of the road, and they're good people. And I can't help but think of a good friend of mine, shooter, who I know voted for Donald Trump. And if we talk to that guy right, he will vote for Joe Biden. But if he really gets afraid that we're extreme left, then he'll Donald Trump again. And just because that one issue, and as you mentioned, when seems like in our rural areas, abortion and gun rights are 2 of the biggest issues, the single issue voters. And it's crazy. So you can talk all day about all kinds of other issues, but if they think you're going to take their guns, they'll vote against you. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And so I won't go through all the statistics. Amber did a good job on all that, right? But also, I think sometimes Democrats miss an opportunity, and that is, as Amber accurately mentioned, in the state of Iowa, 80% of the gun deaths are from suicide. And what are we always crying for as Democrats is mental health care, right? Please quit cutting our mental health care out here. And when I talk to gun owners, it seems like I said, we would be smart to pony up some money for mental health care, because then the gun deaths might go down from suicide. And again, giving up a little bit, that pendulum swings, I always tell them. It swings, and if you go too far right, someday it will swing a lot further left than you want it to go. So it's important for us all to try and meet in the middle. And I think as Democrats, we're missing an opportunity there to cut a deal and say, we need some funding for mental health care. We both benefit from this. We know it's out there. It's a serious issue. And, for people to get mental health care so that we can reduce this, certainly this suicide rate would be enormous. And again, that's 80% of the deaths in the state of Iowa. So why not start on ground that makes some sense? I'll go through a few of my quickly here, Glenn, through some of my wish list, I guess, that I would have and things I've had some success with. And Amber also mentioned background checks. And instead of throwing statistics generally at people like this, what I've found a little success with is looking purely at self-interest. And that is, and again, I've had this conversation with some of the most extreme right-wing gun owners you can imagine. And I said, we want background checks. And they go, what do you mean? We don't want background checks. I go, absolutely we do. Because if you're in the gun culture, you are occasionally buying and selling and trading guns, just like you would if you're in the car culture or other cultures of collections and things like that. And my thing to them is, if I have a gun and I'm going to sell it, and Glenn, I randomly sell it to a guy on the street, and he walks in and murders his wife, God forbid, or somebody else, or goes into a school shooting, I'm going to be held personally liable and probably lose everything I've worked my entire life for. That's purely self-interest, okay? But that kind of rings true with those guys. I said, that's why we want background checks, because we have a background check, and I sell a gun to somebody, and the law says he or she are all right to own a gun. At least I have done my due diligence, and I'm liably off the hook. And to a lot of them, that makes some sense, And so the background check is a pretty easy one for me to usually get over. And I rarely get any pushback from that, because I'm going to sell a gun to somebody, they're going to have a background check, because I'm not going to take that financial responsibility. That's one idea of a way to address that. The other area that I think is really big is, and again, Amber accurately mentioned this, we focus on the things that make the national media, like the mass shootings, but it's very, very, very low on the risk as far as that happening to you. Not saying it's good, and I'm not saying any number is good by any means, but again, we often focus on the 1% issue and miss the 80% issue. But red flag laws, if we want these things to quit happening, along with the domestic abuse situations, that's where a lot of the mass shootings that we see on TV could probably be prevented. And that is, use myself as an example. Jan says I've lost it, Glenn. James is, what she might do, so I better be careful. But I've lost it. I'm not mentally, capable to own firearms anymore. She calls the right authorities, and they say, James, you can't own firearms anymore. Again, does that scare gun owners? Absolutely. But the thing again is, what we want to do is get rid of these mass shootings, obviously for all kinds of reasons, but also because it gives guns a bad name and likely to have more gun control. The key to that one is massive due process. There must be clear, concise opportunity for somebody that is unfairly accused of things to not lose their gun rights. That would be the big pushback you would hear. But if you have that built into it, I think a lot of people understand that most of us want to get the guns out of the wrong hands, and that's a big issue. We want to all, again, I've mentioned already the funding mental health care. I think that's a huge deal. And that is not meant as an insult to anybody with mental health care. And certainly not everybody with mental health care is going to hurt somebody else, but they oftentimes hurt themselves. The first time I was a pallbearer as a young adult, I was 18 years old, was a good friend of mine. He was 19. He had gotten some bad drugs in college. And at 19, he took a gun just like one I had when we were kids and shot himself. So I've certainly been in those situations where my literally buried friends that shot themselves on purpose with a handgun. If there'd have been the right mental health care there, if there'd have been maybe red flag laws, maybe that could help and prevent that. So I've been there. The other thing is, if you want to hunt in the state of Iowa, and actually almost every state in the union now, you have to go through a hunter safety course to be able to hunt pheasants, anything, basically. I don't understand why you don't have to go through a course, at least below age 21, before you purchase a firearm, or things like that. I think a lot of gun owners would be along with that. Okay, as far as safety, things like that, we can prevent a lot of the accidents. So I think that's a good idea. The other thing is, I am not, I don't have, you were not going to take away concealed carry. I don't believe at this point it's out there. Again, when I was a kid, what Amber mentioned earlier, you'd go to jail if you had a shotgun in your car that was loaded or uncased. All your guns had to be unloaded and in a case. Now, that's not the case anymore. But concealed carry is out there now. But what is ridiculous is, and I've heard this from a gentleman that teaches concealed carry classes in Nebraska, that if you can go online and get a concealed carry class done, or worse yet, what they call the, I lost my term here, but it's shell carry, I believe it is. Because of the Second Amendment, they think that just gives you the right to carry a firearm. Even law enforcement people I talk to generally say that's a bad idea. Because again, the argument to go on, just the reason why we want people to have to go through a course before they carry a firearm is because when they do something stupid, it's going to look bad on all of us, and we all, look bad from that. So we want to, work with our own herd anyway. So that's another one. I think the concealed carry, there needs to be mandatory classroom training and range training to know how to safely load, unload, and shoot your firearm and things like that. The area that, and I don't believe in open carry. I think open carry is a bad idea. It scares people, number one. Number two, what I think is really ridiculous is if you are actually carrying that firearm, thinking, you're going to prevent this crime. If I'm the bad guy entering the bank or whatever it is to rob it, and you have a gun on, I'm probably going to shoot you first. If it's at least concealed, nobody knows you have a gun, and but open carry is a bad idea, I think, and yeah, that should be done away with. And I think a lot of gun owners agree with that. Again, this is things I think most reasonable gun owners, at least a small percentage, will go along with those things. And a lot of these things will go a long way to reducing a lot of the deaths and the violence. And not going to reduce all of it. And that's about it. Now, the one last issue I'll talk on real quickly, we hear all the time, is assault weapons. When you, and Amber correctly mentioned this, about 65% of gun deaths are from handguns, and about 4% are from rifles, and about 2% are shotguns, and the rest are other things from homicide, excuse me. So 4% of all deaths, homicides, are from rifles, which the assault rifle, and again, falls into, which is pretty low when you get down to all rifles are in that group. And they unfortunately maybe are the most popular weapon out there. So AR-15 version, it's kind of the erector set for gun. And they can put new uppers and lowers and all kinds of things on it. I won't go into all that. I think the reason why you want to go after that gun is because of firepower is what you're really after, and not necessarily a certain gun. If you go after semi-automatic guns, then guys go, wait, you want Dad's old Browning, semi-automatic shotgun that I inherited, and it's too hard to separate all that. So if you're going to go down that path, I suggest you go after magazine limitations instead of the actual gun. You'll achieve essentially the same thing by reducing firepower eventually, but not take on the fight of a certain gun that lots and lots of people own out here. One quick story on that. I had a friend of ours, certainly would never mention the name, but she was on a chat room one day talking about, and her husband are both Democrats, and she said, I don't understand why anybody would own one of those AR-15s. Somebody picked in and said, your husband owns 2 of them, right? So anyway.
Right. People just don't understand exactly what they're.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So you framed this in a very interesting way when you talked about sort of the 2 directions to come at this that we care about when we're talking about guns. One is about responsible gun ownership, reducing death, safety
Right.
as of interest, and the other is about firepower.
Right.
and that there's a certain degree of people who, it's about the size of the engine in their car.
Right.
It's not necessarily that they're going to race down the interstate with it, but having that level of power is is why they want that particular car. Same with the weapons, do you think?
Somewhat. I mean, I think, and admittedly, I'm a gun owner, a gun collector. I mainly collect antique guns, but I own a lot of guns, and I like shooting about anything that goes bang. It's just, is my, one of my entertainments, and I like those things. It's again, having been a kid raised on the farm and around the countryside, almost always armed with something. And so, again, you could judge me for that wherever you want, but the point being is that and I don't mean to minimize this, but we don't have a problem on a statistical basis here in Iowa with mass shootings. We have a massive problem with suicides. Again, that should probably be our first attack. If 80% of the problem is suicides, I would say that's where you start, not at the less than 1%. But if you are going to go after the assault weapon attack that is on the news media, then I suggest you not go after the gun, go after the magazine. Even Obama was pretty smart about that. You remember, there were two things that he was pushing for. That was background checks and magazine limitations. He never talked about more guns because it gets into such gray areas about what actually is an assault weapon. And pretty soon, everybody's afraid. The guy that's the legitimate gun owner that has grandpa's, again, Browning automatic shotgun goes, wait, I'm not voting for you if you're taking, again, because you're going to call it an assault weapon, and that's a dirty area to go down a lot of times. And I would, if it was my perfect world and I was running for office, that would be one of the ones I would leave towards the last, because I can think of friends, Joey's friends that own AR-15s. They haven't with them. Do they need them? Does anybody need them? Do I need them? No. I'm glad you give you mine. Sure. But if nobody else does, I don't think I've solved the problem. So.
I think one of the questions that came up, there was a question here in the Q&A, was about the ARs and how do we convince gun owners that we aren't coming after
right.
those, with and I think framing it in that firepower and magazine volume there, and it kind of fits with this other question that shows up here in the Zoom as well about, at some point we limit what weapons people can have for their own defense. We all agree not everybody should own a nuclear weapon.
Right.
It's we're getting down to where do we draw that line, but there is absolutely a demand to address those types of that type of firepower, rather than framing it in a firepower rather than a weapon manner. It seems like
I think so. I mean, again, that gets to that's getting down, again, thinking about the people that I talk to, that gets into a tougher, and I understand those out there listening going, who needs those kind of weapons? I understand, I get that. But the problem is they're out there, and again, in Iowa, they are very, very, very rarely used in the wrong way. And that in itself breeds a problem. I mean, not a problem, but in the mind of most of these people, it's like, my gun is all right. I'm not hurting anyone with it. And nobody else is, around in the area, or I don't care about a mass shooting, And so I just think that area, you got to be really careful. If I was running for office, I would be careful about that area as far as going after it, because again, are you really trying to get the gun deaths down? If you are, we know, again, those percentages where those are, and luckily Iowa, like Amber mentioned, very low on the gun violence area, as far as murders and things like that, and we're extremely high on the suicide. That's a more positive way with most gun owners to talk about. Here's one of the problems, and access to guns, unfortunately, are not good for people who have tendency towards suicide. So, but it is an area to talk about.
I'd like to pull Amber in on this because it seems to sort of like a perfect segue into our continuing
Sure.
together, which is about to of address Moms Demand Action. Is there a position on these assault-style weapons or magazines, or is there something more to add to the conversation?
Well, I will tell you that the conversation around assault weapons is a complicated one that this organization has wrestled with since day one. Because of course we began because of Newtown, because of Sandy Hook, which was perpetrated with an assault rifle. And but as we began to grow as an organization, we had moms coming to us from urban areas, from communities with really, really high gun violence, like St. Louis, and African-American families saying, listen, I've lost 6 members of my family to gun violence, and not a single one of them died because of an assault rifle. So if you're going to focus on assault rifles, you're missing our story, you're missing our family, you're missing the violence that is endangering us. And then the larger conversation also became around the issue of suicide as well. And so, but by the same token, we have what's called the Everytown Survivors Network. So Everytown is kind of the overarching organization, and Moms Demand Action is a subsidiary, I guess, for the lack of a better term. And so we have the Everytown Survivor Network, and we have people in the Survivor Network who lived through Sandy Hook, who buried children that were shot in the movie theater in Aurora. And so they want an assault weapons ban. And so it's balancing those interests and balancing that conversation, because, for families who have had loved ones taken in this way, they're very single focused. And there's a lot of people for whom, they are motivated to go to the polls because of the idea of a school shooting and the idea of stopping that. So, mom's lead position is universal background checks on every single gun sale. That is our number one goal. That is what we fight for. That we will do it by hook or by crook. That is what we want in this country, because we believe that is going to save the most lives. That is what the data says. It's what's supported by the most Americans. And so, that doesn't mean that assault weapons aren't something that we want to see regulated. But it's a complicated. And James, you really nailed it. It's it's just a very complicated area.
And you mentioned the universal background check. Obviously, both of you did. The gun loophole gun show loophole gets closed by that, right?
Right. The gun show loophole, basically what that means, and it's probably a little misleading, the terminology, because it's really just private sale. Okay? Mm-hmm. In other words, I can go pick up, and I admit I have bought guns through a ad in the paper. They had a gun for sale. I bought it. They asked for a permit. Almost never. Have one, yes, but that's the gun show loophole. You can privately sell to anybody now. You can walk through a gun show and buy a gun from somebody there that might be privately, yes. Most, not all, but most of the people at gun shows are federal firearms licensed dealers. Okay, so they do a background check, but it's the private sale, really what they're talking about when they say gun show loophole. And I again am in favor of the background check also, Amber. Probably the only area that I think you might get pushback, and I would maybe have some agreement with, is to your relatives. That's the thing you get into. I really have to go through a background check to get grandpa a shotgun.
Chuck Grassley always brings that up whenever.
Okay.
What about my little transfer I got to my grandson?
Yeah, I know that, and they certainly use that. But and one last thing I didn't mention real quick too, that's coming to this a lot, and again, most gun owners aren't for this. Is what's called ghost guns, and that's become a big deal again with probably more urban violence than anything, because there are guns that are just shy of completely put together. Order them, and I think they come with the drill bit. You make about 2 drill holes, and you put together, and you have a semi-automatic handgun. Mm-hmm. And no serial number, no way to track that. Again, by gun people, I say we don't want those, because again, anytime somebody shoots with any gun, they give us all a bad name, and we look crazy. So let's get on the side of not supporting ghost guns, for goodness sakes. That's another one that's in there too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question about gun auctions or just
Yeah.
any auction that involves a gun.
Good question.
On that same category, private sale? Or would that be
Yeah,
different?
no, it doesn't. That's a good question. No, every auction I've ever been to where they sell guns is not private sale. It is a situation where, again, if you have a permit to purchase or concealed carry permit, then you've already been checked out. You can take the gun home with you. If you don't, they hold the gun until you clear the 3-day waiting period and the background check, depending on what you're buying. So no, I've never. And auctioneers, I'm sure, are terrified of the same thing, liability. If they send a gun home with somebody that didn't meet the requirements, they'd probably be liable as well. So there is not a problem that I've seen in auctions. It is private sale. That really is the gun show loop.
And that's why in Iowa, the permit system is so important and why it's so important to maintain the integrity of it. Because, so Iowa kind of has a dual permit system. There's a permit to acquire and a permit to carry.
Right.
That permit to carry obviously lets you carry it out in public. Iowa does have open carry,
Right.
but you do have to have your permit on you, and you have to be able to present that if law enforcement asks you. Or you can have that permit to acquire. You can keep it in your home and use it, obviously for self-defense and that sort of thing. Historically, permits have been a matter of public record. So you could go down to the courthouse and look up and see, who in your county has a legal gun permit. And part of the reason why they did that was so that if there was a private sale and I was going to sell a gun to Glenn, I could go to, are you in Pottawatomie County?
Yes.
Yeah, so I could go to Pottawatomie County and I could look up and see, okay, Glenn has a valid permit. Well, they decided that they wanted to make that private. They don't want, so they passed a law. I think it was part of the omnibus gun bill to make gun permits private. Well, then that has created a problem for private sales and even for federal firearms dealers, because if you go to, your Sportsman's Warehouse, you're going to have a background check, but you also have to show that permit. And so, but the problem is that the permit's good for 5 years. So you've got that paper permit and it says it doesn't expire until 2025, but guess what? Last weekend, your girlfriend put a restraining order against you. Well, when you present that permit, the person that's selling you that gun, they don't know that. And they don't have any way to look that information up because that's all private. So now Polk County, which issues the greatest number of gun permits per annual, obviously because it's the greatest population, has created a database system and an app for gun sellers in Polk County to be able to use, where you can look up the permit by the serial number on the permit. So you can look that up so you can verify that permit is still valid. I talked with the Polk County Sheriff's Office and they said, there's a whole process that they go through when somebody's permit is revoked or suspended, where they basically kind of go over to somebody's house and say, hey, I'm the Polk County Sheriff and I'm here to take your paper permit. And they're like, oh, it's in my other jeans and I left it at work and the dog ate it and And so, so this is a good fail safe, to make sure that those guns are not falling into the hands of people that shouldn't have them. But I wanted to just add one thing really quickly in terms of conversations with people. Oftentimes where I find the common ground is I say, we both know that there are people in our community that shouldn't have guns. I've never had anybody disagree with that because we all know, for whatever reason, there are people who live in our community who should not have access to firearms. So how are we going to make sure that they don't get them? Background checks. See, we agree.
There's, we've been talking about how do we talk to Republicans or people to the right, people who want more and more access to guns, and how to approach them. There's another side of the coin here, which is people on the left who feel we really haven't done enough in terms of gun control and standing up against gun violence. I'm learning. We're not
gun violence prevention.
Prevention. That we haven't taken bold enough stances and pushed legislation in that direction.
I think. Yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
Well, I was just going to say
that's why I mentioned some of those things. I think we can. There are things there that I suggested that we need to do. Now, that's things that I think probably get a lot of common ground on. The ideas that I mentioned that do move that pendulum a long way. Probably not all the way when everybody's going, but again, we probably need to compromise a little bit on this. You're not, said if you think all guns ought to be taken away tomorrow, it's probably not going to happen, okay? And like I like to tell people, unfortunately, we did manage to slaughter each other by the millions before guns were invented. So, go ahead, Glenn.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I believe that the Obama administration removed exactly 0 guns
Exactly.
from the hands of
I have
the U.S.
I've used that one before. I said my car is full of all the guns that Obama took away from me and Governor Vilsack.
Right.
Oh yeah, there's none in there.
Amber, any thoughts on are we taking bold enough steps to be appreciated, or are we being too timid?
I think it's a very delicate balance. And I think as an organization, this is something that Moms has really walked that fine line as well, because we have members from the Bay Area of San Francisco, and we have members from Montana. So, we have, the organization has always had to be very careful about, what are our front facing leaders saying that is going to play in, Bay Area and wherever. And so and that's why I think that it's good to have to get together and to have conversations like this. And I think and I've really, like I said, seen myself as kind of a cultural ambassador. Moms Demand Action is working and has established cohort groups just for gun owners and for rural members and different things like that, to be able to talk about how one of the conversations that I had one time, somebody was like, why would you own guns? It's so dangerous. And I said, have you ever taken your kids surfing? Have you rock climbed with your child? Bottom line is, you and I both do the single most dangerous thing we will ever do with our children without ever thinking. We put them in a car. So everybody's going to have different choices in terms of, what is safe for their family. Boy, are we having conversations about that around COVID right now, right? And so, so it's been an interesting opportunity to have some of those conversations. And I, again, continually come back to that we're here, as Ruby Bodeker says up in Northwest Iowa, we are here, we are still here. By we, I mean rural Democrats, gun owners, we are still here, we still vote, and you can't get this done without us. So bring us to the table. Let us be part of the conversation. We have a wealth of knowledge that we can help you build a better solution. Just like, and I tell people all the time, we could snap our fingers, ban assault weapons tomorrow, and really not see an appreciable difference in the gun death rate in this country. So if we're going to put our energy and our effort into something, let's make sure that it's a thing that is going to give us the best bang for our buck, no pun intended, and and that it is supported most broadly by the majority of Americans. And we've seen support for background checks. And James, I'm so glad that you mentioned red flag laws, because Iowa doesn't have a red flag law. We need that desperately here, considering our situation with suicide. And so, those are things that have a broad base of support that, if we get all of that done and, and then we're ready to do assault weapons, then let's talk, but other than that, let's do what we know is going to make the biggest difference.
Thank you both so much. We have hit the hour, sadly. I could do this for another hour. So, seriously, very informative. And I think some great talking points. What's really helpful about this is you've given all of us some tools to use when we talk with other people. I'm going to put a little plug for what I just put in the chat, which is volunteering for the 2020 campaigns. Go to mobilize.us/Iowa, and use what you've learned here to talk with voters about why Democrats are the right choice and what really reasonable gun ownership and reduction of gun violence looks like. So please use that information. Again, James and Amber, thank you so much. I really encourage everybody to come back September 30th for the education forum. If you're interested in being involved with the caucus, come back September 17th. All of those events will be posted on the I would, the Democratic Party's Rural Caucus page. Thank you again to Judy Kading, Jackie Steiber-Cordone, and Vicki Rosander for organizing today's speaker and today's event. So lucky to be here, and everybody stay safe. Thank you.
Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.